The deafening roar of the Daimler-Benz DB601 engines echoed through the skies over Dover in September 1940, as a formation of Messerschmitt Bf-109s sliced through the clouds toward English territory. For the veteran Luftwaffe pilots, this was expected to be just another routine mission. After all, they had dominated the skies over Poland, Norway, France, and the Netherlands with a brutal efficiency that had left the world astonished. Their fighters were considered the most advanced in the world, their tactics revolutionary, and their confidence unshakable. But on that fateful day, when the first Spitfires emerged from the clouds like silver phantoms, something fundamental changed forever in the minds of these German aces. What they encountered was not just another enemy fighter, it was a technological revelation that challenged everything they thought they knew about air supremacy. Within minutes, pilots who had shot down dozens of enemy aircraft found themselves desperately fighting for their lives, facing a machine that seemed to defy the very laws of aerial physics they knew. Hauptmann Werner Mölders, one of the most respected aces of the Luftwaffe, with 68 confirmed victories, described in his personal diary the first time he faced a Spitfire. It was like fighting a ghost that could dance in the air. The comparison was not poetic, it was technical. While the Bf-109 relied on its superior speed and dive capability to dominate combats, the Spitfire revealed an agility that seemed impossible for a modern fighter aircraft. The secret lay in its distinctive elliptical wings, an aerodynamic innovation that German engineers had considered impractical for mass production. These wings were not just aesthetically elegant, they redistributed air pressure so efficiently that they allowed tighter turns at low and medium altitudes, exactly where most aerial combats occurred. When a Bf-109 attempted a standard evasive maneuver, a dive followed by a sharp turn, it discovered that the Spitfire not only kept up, but often managed to position itself advantageously for an attack. The German pilots, accustomed to dictating the terms of combat, suddenly found themselves reacting instead of attacking. The technological superiority of the Spitfire extended far beyond its revolutionary aerodynamics. While the early models of the Bf-109 carried only two 7.992 mm MG-17 machine guns and a 20 mm MG FFM cannon, the Spitfire Mki entered combat with 8 303 Browning machine guns, each capable of firing 150 rounds per minute. This meant a combined rate of fire of over 9,000 rounds per minute, a deluge of metal that could shred an aircraft in seconds. Oberleutnant Hans-Joachim Marseille, who would later become known as the Star of Africa, reported in a letter intercepted by the Allies, "When a Spitfire gets a firing position, you have maybe 2 seconds before your aircraft turns into flying scrap." The concentration of fire was so intense that German pilots developed a new emergency tactic. Upon spotting a Spitfire in an attack position, they would immediately execute a high-speed escape maneuver, abandoning any attempt at direct combat. It was a tacit admission that, under equal conditions, the Spitfire possessed a lethal advantage. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine that powered the Spitfire represented an engineering revolution that the Germans gravely underestimated. With 1,030 horsepower in its initial configuration, the Merlin was not only powerful, it was refined in a way that the Daimler-Benz DB601 could not match. The difference manifested in climb capability. While a Bf-109E took approximately 6 minutes to reach 20,000 feet, a Spitfire Mki reached the same altitude in just 4 minutes and 42 seconds. This 78-second advantage might seem insignificant, but in aerial combat, it represented the difference between life and death. German pilots discovered that their favorite climb and dive tactics were neutralized by the Spitfire's ability to match their climbs and even surpass them. Major Adolf Galland, commander of JG-26 and future General der Jagdflieger, admitted in his reports that the Spitfire transformed aerial combat from a hunt into a duel of equals. Thus, the frustration was palpable. For the first time since the beginning of the war, Luftwaffe pilots faced an aircraft that not only resisted their tactics, but rendered them obsolete. But the true technological revolution that left the German pilots perplexed was not just in the aircraft itself. It was in the system that guided it to them. The chain home, the British radar network, represented a strategic advantage that the Luftwaffe took months to fully comprehend. While the Germans relied on visual observers and reconnaissance patrols to detect enemy formations, the British could see through clouds and darkness up to 120 miles away. This meant that the Spitfires were rarely caught by surprise. Instead, they were directed with surgical precision to intercept German formations at the most advantageous time and place. Hauptmann Helmut Wick, commander of JG-2, wrote in his mission report, "It's as if they knew exactly where we would be, even before we took off." The paranoia was not unfounded. The radar allowed British controllers to position the Spitfires at higher altitude, with the sun at their backs, and with local numerical advantage, even when the Germans had overall numerical superiority. It was a form of technological warfare that turned every German mission into a potential trap. The constant evolution of the Spitfire during the war created a logistical and tactical nightmare for the Luftwaffe. While the Germans struggled with resource and production limitations, the British continued to refine their aerial war machine. The Spitfire MKV, introduced in 1941, carried 20mm Hispano cannons that could destroy a Bf-109 with just a few direct hits. The MK-9, which arrived in 1942, had a Merlin 61 engine with a two-stage supercharger, allowing superior performance at high altitudes, exactly where the new German FW-190 fighters tried to seek advantage. Each new variant forced the Luftwaffe to rethink its tactics and train its pilots to face ever-increasing capabilities. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, a veteran with 176 victories, observed in his memoirs, "We were not fighting against an aircraft, but against a philosophy of continuous improvement that always kept us one step behind." The frustration was compounded by the fact that, while the Germans developed countermeasures for one version of the Spitfire, a new variant was already being tested in British skies. The psychological impact of the Spitfire on Luftwaffe pilots transcended its technical capabilities. The aircraft became a symbol of British resistance that seemed impossible to break. German pilots who had dominated European skies with imperial arrogance found themselves facing adversaries who not only resisted but thrived under pressure. Losses began to accumulate alarmingly. In just 4 days during the peak of the Battle of Britain, between September 15 and 18, 1940, the Luftwaffe lost 175 aircraft, while the RAF lost only 79. The math was brutal and inescapable. Lieutenant Franz von Vera, one of the few German pilots to escape British captivity, reported that morale plummeted when we realized we were not invincible. The Spitfire had broken more than German aircraft. It had shattered the myth of the Luftwaffe's invincibility. Pilots who once flew with absolute confidence now constantly checked the sky behind them, knowing that a Spitfire could emerge from the clouds at any moment. British industrial superiority, revealed through the continuous production of Spitfires, represented another shock to the German mentality. While the Luftwaffe struggled to replace lost aircraft and pilots, British factories produced Spitfires in numbers that seemed impossible for a nation supposedly on the brink of collapse. Supermarine and its associated factories managed to produce over 20,300 Spitfires throughout the war, a number that surpassed the total production of many types of German aircraft. Even more impressive was the production speed. In 1940, during the most critical moments of the Battle of Britain, British factories produced new Spitfires faster than the Luftwaffe could shoot them down. Major Günther Rall, with 275 confirmed victories, observed bitterly, "For every Spitfire we shot down, 2 new ones appeared the next day." This industrial reality forced German commanders to confront an uncomfortable truth. They were not just fighting the RAF, but the entire industrial capacity of an empire determined to survive. The reluctant recognition of the Spitfire's superiority by the Luftwaffe's own commanders marked a psychological turning point in the air war. When Hermann Göring, Reichsmarschall and Supreme Commander of the Luftwaffe, asked Adolf Galland what he needed to defeat the RAF, the response was devastating in its simplicity: a squadron of Spitfires. This admission, coming from one of Germany's most respected aces, echoed throughout the entire German military hierarchy as a tacit acknowledgement that they had encountered a technologically superior adversary. The irony was palpable. The nation that prided itself on its engineering and technological innovation had been outdone by an aircraft that combined aesthetic elegance with functional brutality. Veteran pilots like Johannes Steinhoff began referring to the Spitfire not as an enemy, but as der Traumjäger, the dream fighter. It was an admission that, in their minds, they had encountered the perfect aircraft, and it was not German. Decades after the end of the war, when nationalist emotions had cooled and technical analysis could be conducted with objectivity, Luftwaffe veterans continued to express admiration for the Spitfire. Hugo Broch, a German pilot with 81 victories who lived to be 95 years old, had the unique opportunity to fly in a restored Spitfire in 2013. His words after the flight captured the essence of decades of reflection. "The Spitfire is a good machine. Wonderful." This eloquent simplicity summed up what many of his contemporaries had discovered in the skies over Britain. They had not been defeated merely by courageous pilots or superior tactics, but by a machine that represented the pinnacle of aeronautical engineering of its time. The hidden technology was not secret. It was simply superior, and that superiority had changed the course of world history.